Hello YouTube, this is a response to a video called 25 Questions for Atheists. I can't find it right now, so I'll post this as a reply to Chthonnis's video where he answered these questions. Chthonnis is a great channel, you should go check it out. First of all, I want to preface all my answers by saying the person asking these questions asks about an atheist worldview. I don't think there's such thing as an atheist worldview. Atheism is a position on a single question, does a God exist or not? You can have atheists, communists, atheists, capitalists, atheists, anarchists. You can have atheists who are Buddhists, atheists who are philosophical naturalists, who are empirical naturalists, who are methodological naturalists. You can have people who, Scientologists for example, you could consider them atheists because they don't have a deity. So yeah, it's a single issue. I'm assuming he is directing it mainly towards people like me, methodological naturalists, the new atheist movement, whatever you want to call us. So in that light I'm answering it, and I'll also note he asks 40 questions, not 25. So with that said, let's start. So the first question, how do you think life began? I think life began as a propagating chemical reaction sometime before the first recognised fossil of life, about somewhere over 3.5 billion years ago. Can get you quite a few scientific papers on abiogenesis. Personally, I believe the evidence currently suggests an RNA first origin for life, but honestly you just need to get on Web of Knowledge, do a search, get down to your local university library, just any public library, search for abiogenesis, there'll be so much info. Does empirical science prove my answer? Second question. I don't think that any science could ever prove to someone's satisfaction that nothing supernatural was involved in the arrival of life. But it can show how it was plausible, and by examining the evidence we can hypothesise about the mechanisms it formed, and maybe one day actually get to a consensus on the fact that it formed in this way based on such and such evidence. For example, the chemical catalysts which were available indicate that an RNA first was much more likely than a protein first. At the moment though, I'm not confident to declare myself either protein first, RNA first, anything like that. It's a developing field, really is worth investigating if you like reading scientific papers and seeing what a real scientific controversy looks like when you see people arguing RNA first, proteins first. Yeah. Question 3. Why has every civilization believed in a creator? Some civilizations believed in a creator, singular. Some believe in creators, not singular. I'd say your statement is actually based on an incorrect idea, but I do think religious thinking is a product of the human pattern-finding mind. I think that what makes us human and helps us survive also tends to make us quite superstitious. Question 4. What types of government structures have been created from an atheistic worldview in the past? Well, I would suppose the deistic ideals of Tom Paine, often held in high regard by many atheists, and many in his own day labelled him an atheist as an insult, particularly after he wrote a book talking about how much bollocks Christianity was. The rights of man, limited republican government, both the collective efforts of many men, some of whom we might now consider today as an atheist, but none of the men self-identified as atheists, so it was considered an insult at the time. People described themselves as deists generally. You still have deists around today, but much less so in my understanding, because most people have gone over to atheism now that we no longer require the supernatural for an explanation of the material world to such an extent. Why does atheism need to present a governmental structure? I mean, many religions have created no new governmental structures. It doesn't affect the truth claims of the religion, does it? So, what positive ideals has atheism offered the world is his fifth question. Positive ideals from atheism? Nothing, as I said at the start of the video. Not a worldview, not a principles, just a single answer to a single question, just not believing in a god or gods. Suppose, given how barbaric a lot of gods are, this might be the positive ideal. Not having to bend your knee to a supernatural dictator, probably a good thing. Question 6. By what authoritative writer or principles do you live your life? And I follow no writer as a dogma. In general, I'm a great admirer of Enlightenment values, personal responsibility, individual liberty and rights, but I don't follow any particular writer or written code like that other than the law of the land, which I wouldn't say is the principles by which I live my life. So 7, do you live by any standards? Well, like I said, I try and live by the standards of my personal morals and the wider morals of society. So yes. Question 8, in your opinion, should religion be removed from public? Or what do you mean when you say, should it be removed from public? Public what? Public institutions? If so, yes. Governments, the state, should make no decisions on religious bases about religion or for religion. The state should be entirely secular. It must also not be explicitly atheist. It just shouldn't talk about religion and gods. It shouldn't get involved at all. If you mean in public discourse, though, and in the public square, everyone's got the right to express their views. Everyone must have the right to express their views. Religious, irreligious, doesn't matter. You've got the right to express your views. So, question 9, if so, where should it be tolerated? As you see, I didn't want it removed from the public square. The only place a government should really be tolerated in religion is in deciding disputes between two religions, not about their truth claims as such, but in arbitration in the way they would for any other corporation or group of citizens working together. Question 10. How did the universe begin? I claim Socratic wisdom. I know that I don't know. There's lots of various hypotheses, quite a few theories going around at the moment. I just use hypotheses and theories in a very loose manner there, for which I apologise to my fellow scientists. But in essence, I don't see what this has to do with atheism. Question 11. Can nothing create everything? Like I mentioned, there's some hypotheses going around, one of which is that the total energy of the universe turns out to be a null energy. There's no overall energy value, making us effectively a sort of virtual particle, which are other things which spontaneously appear from nothing and decay back into nothing, as their overall total energy is still 0. But yeah, that's not really my field. But yeah, nothing creating everything, badly worded phrase, but there are some interesting ideas going around about that. Question 12, what was the cause? I honestly don't know. And by saying I honestly don't know, rather than advancing something supernatural, which I don't have evidence for, I don't commit to something for no good reason. I don't make a truth claim without evidence, which I think is a lot more important than the problem of admitting, I don't know. Not such a great problem. Question 13. Hypothetically, if you had to choose a religion, what religion would you choose? Well, there are religions that are atheistic. As I mentioned above, you could, I don't know if I actually mentioned Buddhism above. But yeah, there are quite a lot of Buddhists who are atheists, and some in the YouTube community. But I don't think I could be a Buddhist. I don't subscribe enough to their philosophies. Quite possibly I could be an animist, but neither of those require belief in a god. If you mean to say what god would I follow, then maybe Tui, the god from which we get Tuesday. He's the leavings of the wolf, the god of honour and courage. He's, I don't know, as gods go, not a bad sort. Question 14, why would you choose this religion? I like Viking mythology. It's a lot cooler than my own Judeo-Christian mythology, mainly because very few people take it seriously anymore. I'd probably enjoy Yahweh a lot more if people weren't going around actually thinking what he said was a good idea, because then I'd have some cool, gory tribal myths. So I like, it's also from an oral tradition, which means things are a lot more flexible, and I like a god who enjoys a pint. So, question 15, would you tell others of the religion? I'd probably talk about it. I don't know if I'd try and convert others, maybe to my ideals, probably not to my form of worship, because obviously in a polytheistic sense you don't need to be exclusive in the way an Abrahamic God is exclusive. 16. How can evolution explain features of irreducible complexity apart from intelligent intervention? Well, again, this doesn't really have much to do with atheism, but I'm trying not to do it with Chthonius, where he had the wonderful answer, this is irrelevant to atheism. At one time, the eye was considered by creation scientists to be irreducibly complex, and then it was explained, and then they considered the immune system the perfect example of irreducible complexity, and then it was explained. And then they considered the bacterial flagellum to be irreducibly complex, and then it was explained.
So positing a supernatural explanation for the unknown is an argument from ignorance. That's the very definition of an argument of ignorance. I don't know something, therefore it must be. It doesn't work like that. When we become less ignorant about stuff, if you've made this argument that, oh, we can't explain this, so it must have been God, you weaken your position on God because we now can explain it. It doesn't work like that. In cases where something is fully understood, then I'll say I don't know. I won't posit the supernatural as an explanation for something that's irreducibly complex, simply because a little research has not yet found a plausible hypothesis for the development of it through naturalistic means. Just wait a little while, or even better, go to university, study, become an expert in it, and maybe you'll get to write up the paper that explains it. The brilliant thing about science is anyone can decide to go and do it. How can natural selection, question 17, how can natural selection produce something that is the prerequisite for natural selection to operate? I think the person asking these questions has a serious fail in understanding biology, and in understanding evolution, and in understanding natural selection. Natural selection always operates whenever things' survival rates vary. For example, a propagating chemical reaction, the chemicals which propagate better are naturally selected because they propagate better. It's almost a tautology to say that, but that's how natural selection works. What I think the person was trying to ask was, how do the correct conditions for natural selection arise? And in this case, it's very simple. Chemicals reactions can be, as I've talked about, self-propagating. That means that a chemical reaction initiates the same chemical reaction again, which can then initiate the same chemical reaction again. Probably one of the most famous examples of this being CFCs in the upper atmosphere are a self-propagating reaction with ozone, and they go on destroying vast amounts of ozone for a single molecule. So a self-propagating chemical reaction starts, natural selection instantly applies, because the ones that don't propagate so well, naturally not selected for. Those that propagate better do so. That's natural selection. All you need to then add is reproduction, which is in the chemical self-propagation part of the reaction. And there you go. Something by which natural selection operates. Question 18. Morality seems to change all the times within the atheist community. Why are morals so subjective within the atheist community? Because morals are subjective amongst all communities as people continue to develop their sense of morality and as the situation changes. Atheists are just human, like everyone else, so in all communities, the morals change with the times. That's the way it works. Question 19. What is the motive of freeing others from their belief in a God if they are happy and content with their belief and don't hurt others? This isn't my original funny quip to this, but I like it very much. If the toaster's talking to you, it doesn't matter that it makes you think warm, fuzzy thoughts, helps you get through the day, and makes you think that if you talk to it in a special way, it will help you. You think your toaster is talking to you. Everyone has a right to think their toaster is talking to them. Everyone has the right to freedom of speech, and you can't remove the right to freedom of thought. But if you think your toaster is talking to you, I will try and tell you you're wrong. And I feel the same way about religion, no matter how good and nice it is. But that's just me. I'm not going to force anyone to do it. I'm just going to talk to you about it. Question 20. How can you tell who is not content and happy? Generally, people tell you when they're not content and happy, but they also use things like body language and your human empathy. Really getting away from stuff about atheism here, but I would, again, try not to do a Chthonist, because as much as I enjoyed his responses, I thought this deserved a long, in-depth one, and I hardly ever do long, in-depth videos. Especially ones of this rambly nature, which brings us to question 21, and why the main focus on Christianity? It's really funny that. Islam always thinks we're picking on it. Christianity feels like it's always persecuted. Oy vey, the Jewish community. In seriousness, most people on YouTube live in countries with a Christian majority, even an actual Christian government like me. Most people on YouTube have a Christian background. I don't, but I grew up in a Christian country where you can't help but know about it. And people talk about what they know. It's always easier to talk about what you're knowledgeable on, and Christianity has been so successful about getting itself into positions of power and government influence that everyone knows about it and everyone wants to talk about it. I also talk about Islam, I also talk about Judaism. So I don't feel I just pick on Christianity. But most people on YouTube do talk about Christianity because they used to be Christian. Question 22. If humans evolved from apes, why have the transitional species gone extinct, but yet the ape and the man still exist? Again, like I said, I think this person has serious biology understandings just wrong. It's staggeringly stupid, this question. I can't believe, really, that they're asking this honestly, given their other questions, but assuming it's merely miseducation, men are a kind of ape, just like a Texan is also a kind of American. I've drawn you a diagram. Hopefully this makes a little bit of sense. Excuse me. So yeah, as you can see, Grandad, my dad, me. My dad is the transitional form between me and my granddad, and my granddad is the common ancestor between me and my Uncle Bob and Cousin Jonathan. Uncle Bob, Dad and Grandad no longer exist. How on earth can me and Cousin Jonathan still be related even though the transitional forms are no longer there? Oh no! That should give you an idea of how it works. Just because they don't exist now doesn't mean they never existed. Species go extinct all the time. I mean, that gives me to question 23. Why the middle gap? Why the middle gap? Well, in this case, Uncle Bob was hit by a freight train. What are we going to do? But species die out all the time. Question 24. Can you give 3 examples where the narrative of Jesus and his message would be a negative influence if what he said was true? This is tricky because I can't just do the stuff I've seen quite a lot of people answering this do and say stuff like Matthew chapter 6 verse 25 and on, take no thought for the morrow, all that jazz about not thinking anything about the future, living just for the day. If that applied to everyone, it would result in mass starvation and the collapse of society. However, I can't answer that because the question assumes that what is talked about in the Bible is true, and so the collapse of society and civilization, as foretold, is not actually a bad thing, but a necessary step to the big rock candy in the sky, you know, to the end of times. So, assuming the Gospels are true, Matthew chapter 5:22, sending people to hell for calling someone a fool. I mean, the very concept of hell is one in which I'm objecting to here. Infinite punishment for finite crimes, that's one negative thing that if what he said was true would be horrific. The idea that people deserve an eternity in hellfire, even if true, is a monstrous one. And it makes the God who set up the system a brutal, unjust wretch of just not worthy to be a lord. So, the second one, the get out clause. Peter's letters make it clear that although through someone acting as a scapegoat, a paschal lamb, a blood sacrifice, anyone can be forgiven by accepting Jesus. Anyone. And this removes people's personal responsibility, the responsibility to others. After all, if God forgives them, it's all fine. Even if it's true, it's still ridiculous, this vicarious redemption through someone else's act taking your responsibility away from them. It's not just, and it's not right. Finally, John 14:6, Jesus being the only path to God. That's a negative influence, even if it's true. If the assumption is that it is true, that Jesus is the only path to God, the only way to the Father, then everyone born and raised in a different religion, everyone who asks for evidence or remains sceptical because they see how useless faith is for getting knowledge that lets you decide, for example, between being one of those other religions I mentioned and Christian, everyone who is unaware or unable to find the right information to convince them before they died doesn't get to God. That's a major negative. I'd say people through no fault of their own getting stiffed like that, I'd say that's hell, the get out of hell through a murder, effectively, through vicarious redemption, and Jesus being the only way to God. 3 negative things which, if they were true, I would still find horrific. Question 25. Do you think the world would be better if there was no belief in a God? Yes. Question... I don't know, I think I included this one in the same one. What if there were no rules or standards to that belief system? Which maybe means I got the counting wrong and there's actually 41 questions. But there's such grammar fail in that question, I think it needed the first part to make sense. If he's referring to the belief system before a God, it doesn't make sense. So I assume he must mean... Excuse me, I've got a cold. He must mean, if there's no God belief, what if then there's no rules or standards to the belief system of a society, as there's no God anymore? Fortunately, the two are not linked. You can have standards and rules without a God, and you can have God and have horrific rules and standards, or no standards at all. If there were no dogmatic rules, however, very quickly society would develop its own internal rules. I suggest you look into some of the philosophical arguments about how these societal rules are formed, because they're also quite interesting. So, question 26. Can you give 5 examples of atheists being persecuted in America currently? Yes. Church or jail, link in the below bar. Discrimination enforced by law, people being forced to go to churches rather than go to jail if that is their choice, then they must go or be returned to a custodial sentence. This is a form of persecution by establishing a religion. Christians get unfair treatment in the American military. I've heard from many people actively serving and from many other Christians that certain brands of Christianity get certain privileges in terms of time off base, time to spend in religion instead of on duty, time to preach and proselytise to other people, and particularly other people's children who are living on military bases, getting support from the organisations that are established by a secular government. Link below, unfortunately, only the Huffington Post. Another thing, again, Huffington Post links, for which I apologise, but being a non-theist is seen as a problem that can affect your fitness to be a soldier. Another example of persecution. The Boy Scouts of America. They are an explicitly religious organisation. They are explicitly theistic, or possibly explicitly deistic, but you cannot be an atheist and join honestly. You may be able to join if your Scoutmaster is nice and doesn't require you to apply to the standards, because I understand the Boy Scouts of America is a very flexible organisation. But officially, they discriminate, both against gays and against atheists. And they get unfair treatment from the government. They get rights which other outdoors organisations do not get. They get tax breaks that other places do not get. They get rights to use military lands and stuff because of their established tradition, despite their biases and discrimination. And finally, many states officially ban atheists from holding public office. North Carolina, Arkansas, Maryland, Mississippi, South Carolina, Tennessee and Texas all ban atheists from holding public office. There is a law. It is trumped by the United States Constitution, which says there is no religious test for office, but they have a law on the books. And in many cases, they don't want to spend the half an hour it would take to vote and get it off their books. So these are just the clear public ones, official policy, stuff endorsed by official government organisations where atheists are treated in a manner less so than Christians. It's not persecution in the classic fed to the lion sense, but it's discrimination, and I believe fits the definition. When it comes to persecution by private citizens, I'll leave it, I'll not delve, but stuff goes on both ways. People have been fired for being Christian, I'm sure, because, to be quite honest, if someone is going around being aggressively Christian at you and disrupting the workplace, I would fire you. And I'm sure people have been done the same for being an atheist. My gut instinct says that what an atheist would get termed fireable offence would be a lot less than a Christian, but it said I wasn't going there, so I'm probably going to cut this out of the video. Question 27. Do you think the laws that govern America are for the most part just and appropriate? For the most part, yes. Are there bits I'd change? Yes. Question 28. I've split this one into 28A, 28B and 28C. Can empirical science prove the missing link? Question 28A. The missing link, as if there was only just one. Every time we find a transitional fossil, a new species, 2 more missing links appear. Until we get a sample from every generation in a continuous link right back to the first repeating molecule, creationists will claim that there are missing links that we do not have. But yeah, the missing links between many of the gaps creationists still parrot, they've all been, not all been found, but lots of missing links have been found, such as man, whales, early pteropods, tetrapods even. They've been found. We've got some fascinating fossils. I mean, you want a crocoduck? We've got a crocofish thing, mabob, called Tiktaalik. It's fascinating stuff. Footprints even older. So, yeah, interesting stuff. Question 28b, the Big Bang. Can empirical science prove the Big Bang? There is a vast preponderance of evidence to suggest that the Big Bang happened. Until new evidence arises, yes, the Big Bang's as proven as it's going to get. Question 28c, the abiogenesis theory. Abiogenesis on Earth, certainly, still a little iffy. I still have a soft spot for panspermia. However, abiogenesis, as it's taught, that I've seen in university levels, I've never actually seen it taught at the school level. Every claim they make is proven, or they say this is the evidence for, this is the evidence against, go check it out. As I mentioned before, there's still lots of arguments, protein first, RNA first, all that jazz still going on. I need to actually catch up on it because I'm a little behind the times on the science. But yeah, that's abiogenesis is also still developing as a field. So I wouldn't say it is as true as evolution, for example. It does not have the factual certainty that evolution has behind it in terms of the amount of knowledge we have. But evidence for it happening, yeah, that's pretty much there. The final corollary to that question was, if not, why are they taught in schools today? They're as proved as anything else we teach. Question 29. Do you think if the story of Jesus was proven true, that his resurrection would be the greatest feat in human history? No. Question 30. If not, what was greater? Without even going out of the text, the resurrection of Lazarus. After all, Jesus is meant to be a supernatural being. Lazarus is just a dude, just some guy. He came back, and he went on with his life. No one doubted that the resurrected Lazarus was really Lazarus. I mean, to be honest, in the New Testament, people come back to life all the time. All those zombies pouring out of the graves in Jerusalem because Jesus came back, is not really that weird. What was actually greater, really greater, how about exterminating smallpox? One guy coming back from the dead versus a horrific disease gone from the wild. People do not get smallpox anymore. That's millions of lives saved a year, just from vaccination. That's one vaccination, and that to me is far greater than one guy coming back from the dead. So honestly, with good CPR, maybe one day I'll manage to do that. Anyway, question 31. What came first, the chicken or the egg? The egg. Question 32. What does evolution say about the chicken or the egg? The egg is a lot older than the bird, let alone the modern chicken. So you just need to look at the fossil record. Plenty of eggs long before chickens. Question 33. What 3 things would you change if you were the creator of this world? There are much too many possibilities for me to decide. I mean, are we talking from scratch? I mean, I'd probably want to overhaul the complete, change the design, swap it around completely. There's too many undefined variables for me to answer this. I mean, what am I allowed to change? Is it just trees are now purple, or am I allowed to start from the scratch ground up? Because that's more than 3 things, isn't it? What framework do I have to work in? It's just daft. Question 34. If belief in an afterlife is a naive wish for people that are afraid of death, can't non-belief be a naive wish for people that are afraid of accountability to God after death? It could be. It'd be a bit silly. Most people who believe in a God, no matter what their actions, decide that they're good with God. God's fine with them. Whatever they do, God's alright with that. It's much easier just to decide that God is on your side than it is to decide to examine the evidence, use reason, logic, and come to the conclusion he's not real. You could see it as a naive wish for lack of accountability after death, but given most atheists instead choose for accountability to the society around them and to their fellow human beings, I can't really say that it's generally going to be such a case. There obviously will be some people like that, because there's nearly 7 billion people in the world, and someone's going to be weird. In a question 35, in a universe without God or immortality, how is mankind ultimately different from a swarm of mosquitoes or a herd of cattle? Well, we have reason and sapience, but that's about it. I don't know if you'd consider them ultimate differences. So, there aren't any. Question 36. Are humans of more intrinsic value? Intrinsic to what? To other humans? Yeah, we have more intrinsic value, at least other humans do to me, than a swarm of mosquitoes or a herd of cattle does, by virtue of their being fellow sapient beings. In the grand scheme of things, though, we're just insignificant dots on an insignificant dot. We do not have any major intrinsic value, because the universe is a cold, uncaring place. Question 37. Do humans possess the ability to feel love, affection, empathy? Yes. If so, explain why. The brain is a complex set of chemical reactions shaped by its architecture, experiences, and random chance. Certain things happening within it cause a sensation in the mind, which is the process that is going on in your brain, of love or empathy. Can it be explained without using the metaphysical? Not only can it be explained, it can be observed and measured as brain as brain activity in different parts of your brain. If you say you feel in love with someone, we show you a picture of your lover, the same parts of your brain lights up in nearly everyone. And those who don't, they're usually weird in some way. I don't mean just different, I mean there's something different in their architecture of their brain. So yeah, it can be explained and observed without using the metaphysical. Question 38. Who contributes more charitable services and financial resources to the world's suffering and impoverished, atheist or theist? In raw numbers, it's obviously got to be the theist. There's a hell of a lot more of you. The sheer numbers of theists make that a virtual certainty, no matter how hard Bill Gates tries. However, do we define giving to churches as charity? Because an awful lot of that sticks to the hands of church workers. All goes being spent on scripture instead of actual help. Per head, I've insufficient data to say, and so once again I rest in Socratic ignorance. Question 39. What evidence would you need to prove that God existed, and by what standards of evidence? Something consistently external, verifiable by repeatable empirical tests. But you'd have to define the God before I knew what evidence I'd need specifically. Last question for you. Do you follow this standard in all of your current beliefs? I try to. Where I can't, point it out to me and I'll do my best to change that. So that has been half an hour of boredom. I'm sorry if I've been boring and rambly. I wanted to do an in-depth answer to these. Any questions about my answers, feel free to PM me or ask in comments below, or video responses are welcome. Thanks very much, YouTube. Goodbye.